You're listening to the British Baseball Podcast. My guest today is former GB men's national team manager for 7 years, starting out in 2004. He led the team to one of its greatest ever performances in European baseball history by achieving the silver medal in the 2007 Spanish Euros and what is GB's second ever medal in a European Championship. He skippered GB in 3 European Championships overall and 1 World Cup, and was able to recruit a number of high-profile players to the GB national team, including Mike Nikias and Brant Ust. Good people of the British baseball community, I bring you Stephan Rapaglia. Stephan, how are we doing?
Great, Matt. Thanks for having me today.
No, pleasure is all mine. And we just discussing off air, I should add in there now, the newest member of the Great Britain Baseball Hall of Fame.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very exciting news, which I received recently.
Yeah, how are you feeling about that overall?
Well, I'm frankly, I'm overwhelmed. It's very exciting. I'm flattered. It's given me an opportunity to reconnect with many of my former colleagues in GB baseball, which is a real cherry on top. I guess I would say that while I'm extremely proud of it, it's also good to be a big fish in a fairly small pond.
Yeah, and it's a great pond to be in as well. Yeah, some of the stuff that came in that I've just seen as well. Alan Dean, Dino, massive congratulations to co-founders of Old Baseball World One, Stephan Rapaglia's election to British Baseball's Hall of Fame. Stephan's election recognises his tenure as GB head coach from 2004 to 2009, which saw a silver medal placing in 2007 European Championships. Pretty much what we spoke about there in the intro. I didn't plagiarise you, Dino. It was all my own plagiarising of other people. It is, however, Stephan's legacy advising and guiding multiple players and coaches from his tenure go on to coach and play at the highest levels. Stephan's friendship, encouragement, and solid advice has helped so many. A significant number of those coaches and former players go into the up-and-coming World Baseball Classic with Team GB to compete at the highest level. We won't be there without Stephan's care and love for all things Team GB. Sir, we thank you and applaud you for your Hall of Fame election.
Yeah, I read that yesterday. Alan Dean is a class act and a true friend. He has been himself a tremendous asset to Great Britain baseball, and as I understand it, Great Britain softball over the last many years. I don't remember exactly when I first worked with Alan. I know he was part of our silver medal in 2007. I just don't remember if he started in 06 or in 07. But Alan himself has contributed so much to British baseball and is so well liked and well respected by people in the British baseball community that I look forward to his own election to the Hall of Fame one of these days.
Well, if we know someone that's on the committee, maybe we can put that forward to him. And moving swiftly on, let's make this all about you. Dino will get his own podcast when his time comes around. For many people that may not know you, I'm pretty sure it's only like 3 of us. How did your baseball journey start? I mean, how was your home life and your family life, and what was it that got you into baseball? And ultimately, how did it lead you into GB baseball?
Okay, I'll try to handle this concisely because I'm a 52-year-old man and there's a lot of baseball stuff in my background. But although I was born in Germany, my mother is German, my father is American. We moved to the States when I was 2, and growing up in the States, and I grew up in the suburbs of New York City. Being exposed to baseball is very organic. Little League still exists today, of course, and it's still a big deal, but it was the only game in town at that point. My father was a good high school baseball player, a shortstop, and he had me out in the yard and against the wall of the YMCA playing stickball when I was 5 years old. About my earliest baseball memories, and throwing me pop-ups in the street in front of our apartment building. So I had a little bit of a head start thanks to my dad, and I joined Little League as soon as I could at age 7, and I never stopped playing. I had some great experiences in Little League baseball, played high school baseball before the advent of travel, which is a subject for another podcast. I could say some good things about travel and a lot of not so good things. and that went into college. And then I was fortunate enough to get a chance to sign as a non-drafted free agent for $2,500 with the Houston Astros. They threw in a glove too, so it was a better deal than it sounds.
That's nice. Have
Um,
you still got it?
one of the sad moments of my life is when I left it in a dugout in my mid 40s at an old man baseball game, and
Oh
I
no.
went back for it and it was gone. So I had it for a long time, but I no longer have it. When the Astros released me, I called my. This is the segue into getting involved with British baseball. I called my former college coach, Bill Thurston, who was one of the first U.S. coaches to get actively involved in international baseball.
Yeah.
And one of the places that he had been was in Holland. He'd been a coach with Sparta in Rotterdam. And somehow, this is pre internet, he got me connected to the Neptunus Club in Rotterdam. So a week after I got released by the Astros, I was playing for Neptunus in Rotterdam. Had a really interesting baseball experience there and a life experience. We won a Dutch title and the European Cup that summer, and that whet my appetite for baseball in Europe. So many years later, now it's that was 93. In 2001, I'm about to start my real life as a lawyer, but I applied to a an online posting for a job as player for the Tübingen Hawks, and they actually asked me to come over and be their player manager.
Yeah.
So my wife and my then 2 year old eldest daughter and I moved to Tübingen for 6 months, had another great European baseball experience. And then, sorry, this is long. 3 years later, 2004, the posting was probably in 2003. I applied to another job posting. This was on the ABCA website
Yeah.
for Great Britain baseball performance director and national team head coach. Interviewed with Tom Gillespie, who I'll speak about more at some point in this podcast, I'm sure. And Tom, with who was then involved in a formal way with Baseball Softball UK and British baseball, led the process to hire me, and that ended up with my wife and I and our then 5 year old and 9 week old twins moving to Abingdon for 6 months, and I started my baseball journey in Britain.
That's amazing. One of the questions I was going to ask later is what's the biggest challenge you've come across as a manager, but that sounds like a bigger challenge than anything. 5 year old, 9 month old twins and a family moving. Wow, that's something.
Well, yeah, my wife was very supportive, and I will tell you that when we moved to Abingdon, I was doing things like driving 4 hours one way to Liverpool to practice with Martin Godsall and Boodle, and turning
Yeah,
around
yeah.
and coming back for coming back that night to get home to my twins and try to wake up for a midnight feeding.
Yeah, yeah, the joys of parenthood, but like I've never had the 4 hour drive. Well, it's 8 hour round trip.
Yeah.
That's impressive. Would you have changed that now, knowing what you've got at your disposal nowadays in terms of technology of being able to see players, or would you still prefer to be driving up and down the country and seeing people in person and getting to know them that way and seeing them throw or play?
That's a great question. I mean, there's no question that the advances in technology would have made it much easier to see and evaluate players all over, not just Britain, but the world. But at that point, I wasn't only involved with the national team, I was also the performance director. And by the way, to this day, I'm not quite sure what that means, but I don't think I could have done that job. And I'm not sure I did it very well, but I don't think I could have done it at all without traveling around and meeting the important personalities
Yeah,
in British baseball that I met.
yeah, that's cool. You mentioned as well about your love of European baseball. How did it compare to you versus the baseball you played in the States? Did you find yourself enjoying it more in Europe, or did you prefer playing it at home?
I don't think I've ever enjoyed playing baseball more than I did as a college baseball player, for the simple reason that when you're in college, if you like your college, and I did, and you like your teammates, and I did, I loved my teammates. Your teammates for 4 years, you have no responsibilities other than to your academics and to your sport, and you live with your best friends. So striving for the same goal with your best friends who you live with for 4 years is really remarkable. And you're not climbing over each other's backs to get to another level like you are in professional baseball.
Hmm.
So um, I don't think anything from a playing perspective could surpass my college experience. Although I did have a great time playing in both Holland and in Germany. But there is something really fresh and real about European baseball, and I felt it most dramatically when I was the manager of the Tübingen Hawks and then the head coach of the Great Britain team. That although I used the term small pond earlier, when you play in those small ponds, you're playing at the very pinnacle of the sport in those countries. And the people that are involved, while most of them, if not all of them, have day jobs and have other responsibilities, unlike being a professional baseball player in the US, those individuals involved are dedicated and caring and compassionate and committed and love their sport and love what they're doing for their country and for their team. So the emotions involved make it extremely rewarding. And of course, if you coach at a national team level, and this is really true, I think of even much more high profile sports, you're training for a year or 2 years for one brief event. So every game or every competition in that specific event has tremendous meaning.
Mm.
It's not like a British regular season or even a US major league season where you have 162 games. Game one of your event could be the seventh game of the World Series in terms of importance, as it was for us, for example, in Spain, game one against Spain in Barcelona in 2007. I mean, we had been together for years and trained for and gathered a team for one event. And if we had not won game one in 2007, we would not have won the silver medal.
Yeah, that was an impressive victory. That I was going to come on to that later on, before we hit 2000. But since we're talking about it, you beat them 12-8 in their own backyard. And like it said, I've got here in notes, like it is down to that first opening game, the victory. It completely set the table. A strong offensive performance, including back-to-back home runs from future Major Leaguer Mike Nikias and also Brant Hurst in the seventh inning. Can you talk us through that first game, or what you can remember
Well,
from it?
yes, I'll talk to you about it, but a bit more in generalities because unlike some people involved in baseball, my specific memories aren't as strong. I always admire and envy those players and coaches who can recall every pitch and every at bat. I'm not one
Yeah,
of those
yeah.
guys.
We tried to stitch up Jonathan Crammon not too long ago by throwing him an absolute curveball, and Drew Spencer said he'll be able to tell you the color of the seams on the ball that was thrown at him in the third inning in the game. And I was like, oh, why do these guys have such amazing memories?
Yeah, it's funny. Drew told me the same thing about Jonathan recently when I saw Drew. Um, but yeah, so I'm jealous of Jonathan's ability to recall. I don't have it. What I can tell you is that was the first game for not just the team, but also for Brant and Mike as part of the GB program. And um, we had spent about a week together preparing for the event. They had already become leaders off the field, which to me was critically important because they set the tone for how to act and what was really important about what we were doing, which was competing together to win, not some of the fluff that happens off the field in those events. And there's some fun stuff that happens off the field in all of the GB events too, and not all safe for work. Uh, but those guys had really helped set a very professional tone. We also had experienced GB guys on that team who were equally responsible for setting a great tone. Guys like Hall of Famer Brad Marcelino, Hall of Famer Ian Young, but many others. And I don't want to give anyone short shrift here. Obviously, we're talking about 20 plus guys, and everyone pulled the boat in the same direction, which was one of the reasons we were successful that year. But what I remember about that game is that it was a knockdown, drag out, back and forth fight where we were, frankly, a huge underdog. And we got incredibly clutch hits, not just from Brant and Mike, but I remember I think Ian Young had a really important hit in that game. We had some gutty pitching performances, and the game ended with a near brawl when another longtime GB player, Alex Smith, finished the game on the mound and had a couple of choice words for the Spanish dugout as he came off the field.
Brilliant. I won't ask what was said. I said before, is it a family show? I'm sure British Baseball Podcast After Dark, it's getting more call for being greenlit so we can get these stories out. But what happened then?
Matt, you can have Alex on as a guest someday and ask him yourself.
Definitely. I'll make note of that and ask him. So leading up to let's go back then to the 2005 European Championships before we finish off with 2007. That was your first major tournament with GB. How did you prepare for it? And also, you mentioned before about getting a squad together. How difficult was that for you, not being in an era where, like you said before, internet wasn't really rife, and how hard is it for you to get your squad together and find players eligible for GB?
Well, it was difficult to put a squad together that we thought could give us a chance to finish up in the top group of the 2005 Euros. At that point, I was still getting to know the personalities involved in the game, the best talent available within Britain itself geographically, finding players all over the world when that information was much, much more difficult to find than it is today. As everyone knows, the ability to search for information on the internet has become much easier over time. Alan Smith and I spent an inordinate amount of time looking for players who would have the requisite British connections. As I know you're aware, Matt, in order to play for GB in a Euros or in a World Cup, or any, I would describe it as IOC event, you need to be a dual citizen or just a British citizen. So the rules for that are much stricter than they are for the WBC. And it's harder to find players who qualify in that category. So we spent a lot of time. We had help from people around the world who were looking out for us. There was a database of players that were potentially available before I got involved, and we used that as well. In fact, I can't say for sure, but I think both Brant Ust and Mike Nikias were in the database. So there was a process of identifying players, communicating with players, and evaluating players. We certainly didn't get everyone we wanted. And for 2005, we were still growing and building. So our roster in 2005, while reasonably strong, was not nearly as strong as it was 2 years later.
Yeah. Were there any players throughout your tenure that you came close to getting involved but just missed out on for whatever reason?
Well, actually, the one I remember strongest is one that had been involved with the program and is very well known within British baseball. That's Gavin Marshall. Gavin had been part of the program for a long time before Alan Smith and I were involved, and we wanted Gavin, who I think at the time was the most accomplished, at least from an international perspective. You could make arguments for others, but Gavin had played independent ball in the U.S. before that time, and we really wanted Gavin on that roster, but Gavin chose not to participate at that time. So he's the one that stands out. I'm sure there were others and others who were not British based like Gavin, but Gavin stands out.
That's cool. So then, after the 2005 Euros, you had we were talking about the 2007. Now, this one was probably one of the highlights because this is the one where you won silver medal, and like I said in the introduction, only the second time that Great Britain had won a medal in European competition. Significant victories would be the 4-3 win over France, winning the pivotal group match that saw GB qualify as the top seeds of that group. You took an early 3-0 lead, and then France came back to tie the game, Then we had Alex Malahudis scoring a decisive run in the 8th inning after reaching base on an infield single. It sounds like a roller coaster of a game. What can you tell us about the France match?
What I remember strong, we knew that was the critical game at that point, and France was a relatively evenly matched team with us. So that game could have gone either way, as you just indicated. But what I remember most strongly about that game is Alex Malahudis's contribution. And the reason I remember that is if I'm getting this right, and again, I'm no Jonathan Craman in terms of memory, um, I had not started Alex, and I brought Alex in to pinch hit. And Alex, yeah, I mentioned Gavin being perhaps the most accomplished British-based pitcher of his generation. I would say Alex is arguably the most accomplished British-based hitter of his generation. And again, I'm talking about citizens. There's plenty of expats who have come over and played great within the realm of British baseball. But Alex did not start in that game, and he was near the end of his GB career at that point. And we just needed contact from Alex. And he came in and he delivered the key contact. I don't remember it being an infield hit. I remember him driving in the run with a ground ball in the infield. But whether you're right or I'm right, Alex's contribution was to the go-ahead run, and that run stood up. And I was so happy for Alex because no one cared more about GB baseball than Alex Malahudis.
What were your expectations going into that tournament? Did you think that medals were achievable?
It's really hard to have clear goals for the final result when going into a tournament like that. Again, even more so back then, because we didn't have tremendous information about our opponents. Each year when you go into a tournament like that, and maybe it's a bit different today, certainly be different with the World Baseball Classic, where so many players are coming out of pro ball, and there's a lot of information, objective information, and even video information available about your opponents. So projecting was difficult, but we knew we had put together the strongest roster at that point that I think Britain had ever had. The additions of Brant and Mike were critical, of course, but we had really strong players up and down the lineup. Our lineup was deeper than it had been. We had some very good pitchers, guys like Brian Essery and Stephen Sprague and Jeff Freeborn. Again, I don't want to leave anyone out, but we had what we thought was going to be a team that should at least finish in the top group of the Euros that year. And once we beat Spain, we knew we had a chance to get a medal, and that's when we really set our sights on medaling.
Yeah. So here's one for you: the 2022 World Baseball Classic qualifying team that Drew Spencer led versus your team that won the silver medal. Who wins that game?
I think. I mean, look, I don't want to sell my guy short. We played with tremendous heart. We had some great talent. I would put many of our players up against that WBC team, but the WBC team was deeper and far more athletic. I watched every game sitting at my desk. Don't tell my boss, but sitting at my desk in my office in Connecticut, I watched every one of those GB games with tremendous interest and my heart racing, especially in the last couple of games. That GB team is extremely athletic. They're fast, they're quick. Their movements are really smooth. So they had the stronger team.
Okay, so let's have a look then at the 2009 World Cup. One of the biggest victories that was the 4-1 win over Croatia. That was the only win in the tournament, but it was sufficient enough to see the team qualify to the second round. Notable performances were 2-run home run by catcher Chris Bursett and outstanding pitching by Brian Essery and Tom Beleska.
So the talent level of our opponents in that event was really high. I mean, frankly, I don't know if GB has ever played Cuba before or since, but we played Cuba, we played Puerto Rico, we played a Japan team, which is not the Japan major league level team, but still a very strong team. We played some very, very strong competition in that event. And while we only beat Croatia, what I remember strongly is how close we were to beating Puerto Rico. Frankly, Alex Smith pitched a great game, and we probably could have won that game, but an error cost us, and we faced what was Cuba's preeminent team, and I believe we were losing 3-0 in the eighth inning to Cuba,
Mm.
something like that. Anyway, and you know that being a loss, we probably ended up losing 5 or 6-0 in that game. That ended up being a loss, of course, but for GB to go up against Cuba's top players and a Puerto Rican team made up almost exclusively of former major leaguers and compete to the last couple of outs were really remarkable games for us. So to only beat Croatia was I guess mildly disappointing, but I feel like we were rewarded by the fates for that one win and advancing to the second round when Germany, um, which really as a result of a tactical error, lost its final game to Venezuela by the run rule, pushing us into the second round. So I feel like the fates rewarded us for some great games against particularly Cuba and Puerto Rico by getting us into the second round.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. What were your favorite off field? We mentioned some of your favorite on field memories. Well, with your time with GB baseball. What about off field?
One of them is going to be a very highly abridged event because I can't get into the details of this without making myself and everyone involved look bad. But we had an incredible train ride from, I believe it was Munich to Zagreb after a preparation event and on the way to the World Cup because we were playing the first round in Zagreb, which involved many personalities who would be familiar to you, Matt, and a large amount of beer on a train car um, between those two illustrious cities.
Germany is a beautiful place,
Yeah.
and I'm pretty sure you took full advantage of sightseeing.
Well, our last stop before that bus ride, which was an overnight bus ride, was the Hofbrauhaus House.
Yeah. Can you share any stories from that, or should we say that for another day?
Yeah, let's just move on.
Okay, no problem. 2010 Euros in Germany. Finished 8 out of 12. Another great tournament for yourself there. What can you recall from the 2010 Euros?
So, Matt, I'm about 99.99% sure that I was not involved in the 2010 Euros.
Really?
Yeah, so I know that my recent Hall of Fame election announcement states that I was the coach for 3 Euros,
Yeah.
but I'm pretty sure it was only two, and I gave up the job. Alan Smith and I gave up our respective roles with GB Baseball at the beginning of 2010. I think Pat
Yeah.
Doyle was the coach that summer.
Okay. Well, I did do my research, so it just shows that for once, it's not me that's messed this one up. How come you decided it was time to call it quits? Just had enough of the weather.
Well, there were a couple of reasons. I mean, there's the reason that baseball had been at that time removed from the Olympic program,
Mm.
and the World Baseball Classic had not yet been announced. So we were in a position where there was no more funding, outside funding available for our program, and there was no more hills to climb. Again, because there was no chance at that point to qualify for the Olympics. There was no World Baseball Classic. So Alan and I both felt that that was maybe an opportune moment to step away, but we were influenced in that decision also by the fact that there was at that point a great deal of negativity surrounding British baseball and particularly the use of dual passport holding players to strengthen the national team program. Um, I could spend a lot of time talking about the reasons why we felt it was necessary to use dual passport holding players. But I will say that we always tried to balance the use of those players with the use of guys like Alex Malahudis and Will Lintern, for example, who had come up through the British system, because we felt that the players who had really worked hard at developing their ability within Britain and could contribute, even if on the margins, to the national team in international events should be given an opportunity to do so.
Yeah, fair enough. So what happened next and what came next for you in your baseballing journey?
So since I left the GB program, I was lucky enough to be invited back in different capacities by two other successors of mine. One, Sam Debster, had me on the staff as the bench coach in the Regensburg qualifier in 2012, and then Liam Carroll, another illustrious figure within British baseball, who recently had the incredible announcement of being hired by the Red Sox as a minor league manager. I mean, frankly, I'm over the moon for Liam. I think it's incredible. It also, I believe, Matt, you could probably check me on this. Not only would he be the first Brit to manage a minor league baseball team, he might be the first European, or at least player, to come up through the European system, and coach to come up through the European system to manage a U.S. Minor league baseball team.
That's an interesting question. Yeah,
yeah,
that might be
there
worth
have been
looking
other
into.
Europeans who have been in, like Brad Marcelino, for example. Although Brad really came up through, not through the British system, but he couldn't be more tied to British baseball. He's involved in the Major League Baseball, in the minor league baseball world through Major League Baseball. And Steve Janssen, who's coached a few different European national teams, was involved with the Cubs. And there are others, but I don't know of any before Liam that have actually been given the chance to manage a minor league baseball team. But the reason I brought up Liam in the first place is Liam was gracious enough to involve me in the mini camp staff for the WBC when GB had a nice run in Coney Island. Yeah. So and my relationship with Drew Spencer now as the current head coach is also great. Drew and I got to coach a little bit together in Prague Baseball Week last summer when we had a combined team with some U.S. players and some GB guys. But for the most part, since I gave up the GB job, my baseball has been through Old World Baseball, which is a private organization that I run with Tom Gillespie, and we take U.S. players to Europe every summer to play against European national teams.
So you said that you met up with Drew and Liam, and also Mr. Dempster as well, where you're at the am I going to get this right? AB, the American Baseball Coaching.
The ABCA, yeah, the American
ABCA.
Baseball Coaches Association, yeah.
Yeah, there's a cracking photo of the four of you together. I'd love to have been a fly on the wall while we're discussing things, but can you give us a slight peek about your time with those three individuals?
Yeah, well, the four of us were together only for 15 minutes or so in the lobby of the Gaylord Hotel at the Nashville convention, and someone realized that this was a fairly unique and momentous moment. We had to get a picture to memorialize it. I will tell you, there are thousands of baseball coaches that attend this event from hundreds, if not thousands, of different organizations, travel, high school, college, even pro. There was probably not another organization that event that would have had four current and former head coaches present. So it was auspicious, and it was really cool to be in the room with those three other guys and just catch up for a few minutes and get that picture. Because, I mean, Matt, we've talked about it. The GB baseball world is really small, and those of us who were in it in the past and those who are in it now, we all have a very strong connection to the program. It really feels like family, and you hear the word family used a lot when you encounter other people involved with the program. And it was like a mini family reunion for the four of us to get together. And we didn't get into the nitty gritty of any of our experiences. It was just like family members who hadn't seen each other in a long time.
That's cool. Lovely. So tell us a bit more then about Old World Baseball, about the concept and how it all came together and what it does.
Okay, well, I don't want to turn this into a marketing spiel for Old World Baseball. I'll just say that Tom Gillespie, who I mentioned, had brought me into the Great Britain baseball program initially. and has frankly done so much for British baseball over the years. I mean, he got both Alan Smith and I involved at the same time, and so with tremendous help from Alan, who is a great organizer and relentless in everything he does. Tom had a huge impact on British baseball just starting there, but he's done so much else. And he and I have become great friends over the years. When I gave up the GB job, I asked Tom if he'd be interested in starting a program that really combined a couple of loves of mine and also of his, which are um, being involved with European baseball and travel. And I had this impression that because of the advent or the growth of US summer travel for high school aged athletes, that so many kids in that age group were being forced to choose between having interesting life experiences over the summer and playing baseball at a relatively high level with good instruction. So what Old World Baseball does is it combines both. We provide what I think is a unique and really fun and exciting, high quality travel experience. We usually go to 3 different countries within Europe in about a 10-day span. And we balance the travel with baseball against European national or top level club teams. So a very good high school player on their way to play Division III college baseball, and that's what our Old World Baseball rosters are generally filled with, would never have an opportunity to compete for the U.S. against an international opponent. But by playing for Old World Baseball, not only are these guys going over to Europe and having the fun experiences surrounding travel and getting what I'll say is good coaching instruction, but they're also able to informally represent the U.S. and I emphasize informally against European national teams. So for this summer, for example, we'll play the Dutch U19s, the German U19s, and the French U19s. And that's pretty remarkable if you're a U.S. player and you get to do that.
Yeah, sounds good. Great, great to see that you're offering like such a unique opportunity to so many individuals. That's really cool. Right then, I've got a few more questions before I hand it over to listeners' question. Who are some of the best players that you've ever seen play live?
You know, I've watched a lot of baseball. And again, I'm 52 years old, so I've seen a lot of good baseball players. I think we have to narrow that question down to who maybe I've played or coached against
Yeah,
live.
yeah.
It was pretty cool to have coached against Yenis Cespedes for Cuba, who's definitely high on that list. While he wasn't the player that he turned out to be then, I pitched against Johnny Damon in my brief stint in rookie ball in 1992. I wouldn't have told you then that I thought he was going to be one of the best players, but you have to say over the course of his career, it's turned out that way. Um, those are a couple that come to mind. And you know, I've also had the chance to coach some really great players. We've talked about Brant and Mike, um, but one guy that would not immediately come to mind for anyone other than my college teammates and I is I played 3 years with Neil Huntington. He was a year ahead of me at Amherst, and Neil became the GM of the Pirates and had a really nice run there with a couple of playoff experiences. But Neil was also a very, very good college player and very clutch. And his senior year, he hit 470 and had 47 RBIs in a 31 game season. So that was a remarkable run, and I saw that every day from the bench watching him.
That's cool. Who would make your Mount Rushmore of British baseball people?
This to me feels like a question I can only answer by making people feel left out because there's so many great guys that I've been involved with. I'll give you a couple of names.
Yeah.
The but I want to say that I'm only going to focus on people that I had direct experience with. I know that there are outstanding names who belong on Mount Rushmore British baseball, but those are names that I've only heard. I never saw them play.
Yeah.
I don't have fundamental details of their experiences. So, you know, guys like Alan Bloomfield or the Frank Parkers, I only know them from reputation.
Yeah.
But people that I think belong on there are people like Alan Smith, um, who did so much both on the field as a pitcher for the Warriors and the Mets, and off the field for us in the Great Britain program. Guys like Liam Carroll, who has really done remarkable things as a coach, and has also worked many years, or did work many years, for Baseball Softball UK. Guys like Alex Malahudis and Will Lintern, similar for Will and Liam in terms of the off field stuff, and Alex for an incredible run. Brad Marcelino, who um, played almost 20 years within the British system. Josh Chetwynd, similarly. So there are a lot of guys. There are tons of guys that I could add to that list, and again, I apologize to all of them for not listing them. And it's a narrow slice that's come from my experience.
That's cool. Thank you very much for sharing those. What has baseball given to you, on what are you most grateful to the game for?
I'm grateful to the game for so much. I Baseball has given me incredible memories and life experiences, and I wouldn't trade those for anything. But it's also given me a really wonderful group of friends around the world. That's one of the really nice things about having been involved in European baseball and directly involved in 3 different countries. But the friendships that have come from baseball are what I think will stick with me the longest, and are the most important to me. And I'm incredibly grateful to all of the friends I've made, but also the people that have helped me along the way. Baseball's a team sport, whether you're a player or a coach. And the quality of the people that I've been fortunate enough to be around has really elevated my own experience. Coaches like Alan Dean and GMs like Alan Smith, but the other coaches that I worked with, like Brian Cleary and Charlie Sullivan, the Tom Gillespies, the Will Linterns, the Liam Carrolls, etc. All these guys have made a huge difference in my own life and in my own experience. But I'll add one more thing about baseball. It's that, I've been a lawyer now for over 20 years, and every job interview I ever went on as a lawyer, the only thing the interviewers wanted to talk to me about was the line at the bottom of my resume that said I had played 1 year of minor league baseball with the Houston Astros. Baseball's opened a lot of other doors because people find it interesting. It's more interesting than sitting behind a desk in an office.
Yeah. Well, I think I'd rather be playing baseball than sitting behind a desk. 100% all day, every day. And I am not even that good at it, at both things, being behind a desk and doing this. And last one for me is, if you had one wish for British baseball, what would it be?
Well, I'll give you two, because one is I'd love to see GB come out of the next round of the WBC. It's been a magical run so far,
Yeah.
and I'd love to see that continue. Bigger picture, although that, by the way, I think would have an impact on my bigger picture wish. My bigger picture wish is that the game continues to grow. Baseball Softball UK and the British Baseball Federation have really put in a great deal of effort and resources over the years, and the game is growing at the grassroots level in Britain, which is good to see. Um, I'd love to see the game grow to the point where the talent pool in Britain is really deep enough to sustain a national team program at the adult level that doesn't have to rely quite as heavily on dual passport holders.
Mm.
I don't think there's anything wrong with using dual passport holders. Every country does it. But it would be nice to see more domestic talent. And part of that is the growth at the grassroots level, and part of it would also be um, the long-term viability of multi-team clubs, such as you see more in continental Europe,
Yeah.
like the Amsterdam Pirates. This is aspirational, but I believe the Amsterdam Pirates have 2,000 members for baseball and softball. That would be great to see.
That's interesting. That's worth looking into. I'd love to see, like, I'm hoping to have other people on from other national teams and programs and leagues to talk about how, like, they're set up, and to see what we can learn. I'm not saying that the British baseball needs my help or anything. It's just out of curiosity, just to see how they're set up and how they run their programs. But hearing that about Amsterdam Pirates is, those numbers can't be sniffed at. It's interesting.
Yeah, Matt. So let me piggyback on what you just said about your interest in making a difference, and you are, I think, even not just by this podcast, but by the other stuff that you do in the game in Britain. The point I want to make is, as I've grown older, I've come to realize more that for better or worse, one individual can really make a big difference in almost any aspect of life. You see it with politicians, of course, and often that's for worse rather than for better. Uh, but my point is that within the small pond that is British baseball, it's very possible for one or two extremely committed people, and there have been people like this over the years, and there are people like this involved now, but it's possible for one or two or three or five or 10 very committed people, and ideally people who have access to some resources, to change the game in fundamental ways and to really make a difference in terms of the popularity and the growth of the game.
Cool. Interesting. Thank you. Right. Listener question. Jason Greenberg. Smiling face suggests that you know him, which is
Of
great.
course. Yeah.
Be sure to ask him about the first collegiate baseball game in the US and how much it costs to pay off the umps.
So this is a plant. I don't know how much you know about our shared background, but Jason is a great guy, despite the fact that he went to Williams College, my college's arch rival. And
Okay.
and what he's alluding to is that the first intercollegiate baseball game ever played was between Amherst and Williams, which Amherst won handily, something in the neighborhood of 73-32 when baseball rules were a little bit different. Um, I don't think there's ever been an indication of any impropriety in that result. It's just hard for a Williams guy to realize that they were beaten so comprehensively by Amherst back then.
Yeah, I'll take that. There you go. No foul play involved. Stephan, thank you so much for your time. This has been fantastic. It's tradition on the show for the guests to have the final say. So is there anything you'd like to say before we go? Anything we may have missed or any shout outs you'd like to give?
Well, I know I've missed some people that I'd love to give shout outs to. I'd like to thank you, Matt, for having me on, and thank all the people involved in British baseball who, for no recompense whatsoever, put their heart and soul into the game. And I will always be a huge fan of GB baseball. I'll be pulling hard for GB in the WBC. And I thank everyone in the game who's helped me get to the point that I have within GB.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Stephan. Latest edition of the British Baseball Podcast and, of course, the GB Hall of Fame. Thank you so much again for your time. Take care, and I'll see you soon. All the best.
All the best. Take care.
Ta-ra.